All right, what is up, folks? So I'm back in the classroom. So a lot of my subscribers have been asking me to follow up on this topic. I've been talking about, the population collapse, the fall of the nuclear family, and why the Black African population is exploding. So I talk about, Nigeria's population explosion. So yeah, they're averaging about 7.5 million births per year in just one country. In all of Europe combined, there's about 6.3 million births. So how is it possible that one country can have more births than all of Europe combined, right? And yeah, let me actually show you guys some of these numbers. Yeah, let's talk about the China's example. China in 1950 had 540 million people, and China's population officially reached 1 billion on October 27th of 1982, almost doubling in 32 years. And what's even more crazy is that, let me just go down the list of these numbers. China's population peaked in 2021 at 1 billion and 411 million. Now it is slowly going down, and it will be going down for many, many decades. And what's insane about this, right, from 540 million to 1.4 billion is that from 1959 to 1961, there was a great famine. It caused anywhere between 25 to 50 million deaths. These are estimates. And obviously, at this point, right, a lot of the people in the Chinese government, they were concerned about, just a mass famine, and that there's not going to be enough food to feed everybody. That's why China introduced first the two-child policy in 1971. Okay, so before the one-child policy, there was already a two-child policy, and from 1980 to 2012, China had a one-child policy. And if you're wondering why did China introduce the two-child policy followed by the one-child policy, you have to remember at the peak, right, China represented roughly 22% of the world's population, but China only has 7% of the arable land in the world, right? You can't have the population just keep on going up like this. At some point, there's not going to be enough food to feed everyone, and it's going to cause a massive famine, right? So yeah, 25 to 50 million deaths. If Nigeria keeps going at this current rate, it's inevitable because there's only so much resources, there's only so much food. At the end of the day, it is impossible for the earth to sustain 10, 15, 20, 25 billion people. Let's go back to this point. So yeah, how did China's population explode like this, right? Despite the one-child policy from 540 million to 1 billion to 1.4 billion. And you have to remember, look at the UK's population. In 1950, had about 50 million people. In 2025, you're looking at about 70 million. Has not increased that much. And the extra 20 million, that's pretty much all from immigration. There's been no natural growth in the UK for the past 75 years now. So the one-child policy, right, up until 2012, then 2012 to 2015, there was a slight change. So if both spouses in the marriage, if they're both the only child, and so this couple, if they get married, yes, they're allowed two-child maximum. Basically, it was a temporary limited two-child policy from 2012 to 2015. Then for the next 6 years, from 2015 to 2021, China introduced a two-child policy, and everyone was eligible. In 2021, China switched to a three-child policy, but this only lasted for 3 months because China realized that the birth rates was collapsing throughout the country. So this ended 51 years of strict draconian laws in order to restrict population growth, going all the way back to 1971, starting with the two-child policy and ending with a three-child policy for 3 months in 2021. Now any couple in China can have unlimited number of children. However, the issue is that, the vast majority of the Chinese youths, they don't want to get married, they don't want to be in a relationship, and they don't want to have children. So what the hell has happened? The same thing is happening worldwide, with basically two areas are exception, right? The only two exceptions are sub-Saharan Africa and also in the Middle East, right? So there's also a population explosion in the Middle East. So yeah, let's look at the US, for example, the birth rates in the US, right? For white Americans, well below replacement level at 1.4. Even for Black Americans, who for the longest time has always had extremely high birth rates, now they're down to 1.7 children per woman, well below replacement. But how come, when you look at Black Nigerians, so they're at 5 children per woman. How come when you look at Black Americans, it's only at 1.7, right? Replacement is 2.1. Why is this happening? Well, I want you guys to think about it like this. So this is very important. China today in 2025 is about 70% urbanized. If it's not 70, it's very close. I would say 67, 68%. Back in 1950, right? So this is when China's population explosion began from 540 million all the way down to 1 billion to 1.4. Well, back in 1950, China's urbanization rate was only about 15%. 85% of the population, they were rural farmers living in the countryside. And so here's something crazy that has happened. Perhaps this made Chairman Mao extremely popular amongst the Chinese peasants. So yeah, right after he declared the People's Republic of China, October 1st of 1949, there was a Land Reform Act. So basically, all of the wealthy peasants in China, they all really suffered from this land reform. They had their land seized, and a lot of them, they got arrested. A bunch of them, they got killed as well. And their wealth and their land was redistributed to roughly 300 million Chinese peasants. Yes, 300 million Chinese peasants. So basically, the 1 million, some of the wealthiest people in China, they were arrested, they had their wealth, they had all of their assets seized, and their wealth and asset was enough for the Chinese government to redistribute to roughly 300 million Chinese peasants who has never ever owned anything before. So that became the number one driver of China's economy, right? So all of the sudden, out of nowhere, 300 million Chinese peasants, they got their own plot of land, and then they got a nice little brick house in the countryside. So yeah, that's 85% of the workforce. You can say that they're self-employed. They're growing their own crops. They got their own farmland. I mean, honestly, how much work do you guys think there is actually, on the field? Do you guys think, these Chinese peasants, I mean, sure, a lot of them worked hard, but I mean, if you compare it to the average, Japanese worker today, to the average South Korean worker, to the average Chinese worker, who, a lot of them are working the 996, anywhere between 70 to 75 to 80 hours a week. Back in the day, they worked significantly less. Way back in the day, right, 85% of the population, they were basically self-employed Chinese peasants, and they only worked a few hours a day on the field. Well, rest of the time, what would they do? They breed like rabbits. That's how the population, despite the famine from 59 to 61 that killed roughly 25 to 50 million people, and despite the two-child policy already being in place for 9 years, and just the start of the one-child policy in 1980, from 1950 to 1982, right, the population went from 540 million to 1 billion. Well, because way back in the day, right, there was no such thing as, working on your wrist. There was no such thing as picking up women. All of the marriages were arranged in China. So typically a normal age for marriage back then, so 1950s. So for the woman, it would be something like 18 years old. So my grandma, she got married at the age of 18. And my grandfather at the time, he was 20 years old. So that was fairly normal. Typically, a guy gets married at 20 and the woman gets married at 18. And you see, way back in the day, it's not like these people, they had jobs in the city, right? It's not like they have to spend time being stuck in traffic. It's not like they had any kind of entertainment. They couldn't exactly go to a Cineplex to watch a movie or something. It's not like there was Netflix subscription, right? There was no iPad, there was no iPhone, there was no BlackBerry, right? There was no entertainment. It's not like you can go to a fine dining restaurant on the weekend. It's not like you have to commute, 2 hours every single day, 5, 6, 7 days a week in order to go to the downtown office to get to your consulting job. So the vast majority of the time, they had nothing to do. So yeah, they were just doing it all day. We're talking handcuffs, we're talking spanking, we're talking S&M, we're talking missionary, we're talking doggy style, we're talking deep penetration. And if you guys are asking, oh, how the hell do I know that? Well, I mean, the numbers are pretty obvious. Yeah. 540 million, 1950, 1982, 1 billion. Keep in mind, right? Imagine if, the two-child policy wasn't put in place in 1971. Imagine if there wasn't a famine. You think modern women, they're so sexually promiscuous, right? Yes, a lot of modern women, they're having a lot of sex, but with a bunch of different partners. But however, way back in the day, right? I'm talking about these Chinese grandmothers. They had way more sex than any of these modern Chinese, Indian, white, or black women combined. Well, the only exception is that they were doing it with only one guy, with their husband. Yeah, I asked like my grandmother, I asked a bunch of my relatives in the older generation, I asked, so how come, all of you guys way back in the day, you all popping out 5, 6, 7, 8 children? That's exactly what they told me. A lot of them are very, very open-minded. Well, they said, right, there was no internet, no entertainment, nothing you could do back in the day, and 85% of the population, they lived on these rural farms, right? So you couldn't exactly exactly go to the restaurant. You couldn't go to the coffee shop. You couldn't go to the book club to talk to a bunch of people, right? You had no social life. So other than working on the field, right, the rest of your time you spent having sex, right? So a lot of these Chinese grandpas, you think, oh, these guys who are like 5'2", who weigh like 115 pounds, it look like a bunch of skinny chopsticks. Well, these Chinese grandpas, they will have 5 times more, 10 times more, possibly 50 times more, versus any top 1% Chinese Giga Chat today in 2025. They were doing it all day nonstop. And sometimes, yeah, I asked my grandma, sometimes they were doing it 3, 4, 5 times every single day. There will be times, yeah, they will go on a streak for like 2, 3, or even an entire month, having sex every single day, right? Second, third, fourth, fifth round. That's why I said, right, that the previous generation, their life was so much simpler and their life was so much easier. You get arranged marriage to a steamed rice bunny and you have sex 20, 30, 40 times a week. And if you guys are asking, then what happened? Well, obviously, China realized this is not sustainable, right? So, I mean, we only have 7% of the arable land worldwide, and we already represent 22% of the world's population at the time. So the share is down to about 17% now, obviously, due to, the one-child policy and the strict population control. Then also, starting in the 1990s, arranged marriages, they started to get phased out. For the average Chinese guy to get a Chinese woman became 10 times more difficult. So after the arranged marriage system was phased out of China, that's when divorce started to skyrocket. It's very interesting. Divorce has always been legal ever since the founding of the People's Republic of China. But really, up until the 1990s, before arranged marriage was phased out, there was no divorces. So that's when China's birth rate started to really plummet. So in 2025, right, any Chinese couple can have as many children as they want to, but the birth rate is just exactly 1, right? You have to remember, right? 2.1 is the replacement rate, so that's less than half of the replacement rate. And if you look at the divorce rates in mega cities in China, the average is about 60%. So if you look at cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Chongqing, Chengdu, so all of the mega cities in China, the average divorce rate is 60%. And keep in mind, right, in China, having children out of wedlock, it's against the law. Your child is considered to be a bastard, to be a heihu. So that is 100% outlawed. So, I mean, if the divorce rate in all of the cities in China is about 60%, who the hell wants to get married? Yeah, divorce rate in my home province, in the Jilin province, unfortunately, is the highest in China at 71.53%. Yes, that's actually real. And that is a direct result, right? So how come people way back in the day, they were breeding like rabbits? Well, 85% of the population was self-employed and they worked on the farm for a few hours a day. There was nothing to do, no entertainment, no internet. So they had sex all the time, 3, 4, 5 times a day. But if you look at the big cities now, China is close to 70% urbanized. It's 2 of the biggest cities in China, Beijing and Shanghai, right? So birth rate is 0.6 children per woman. Why is it so low, right? So, well, these are the 2 most expensive cities in China. If you want to survive here, right? On average, people in these 2 cities, they work the longest hours, right? And obviously, the more hours you work, the less time you have to meet women, the less sex you will be having, the more likely you're going to be incel. And yeah, that's why the birth rate is so low, because, people have to work insane amount of hours. They have to work to 996 in order to survive. And this is true worldwide. You guys can go to a website. So it's called Black Demographics, run 100% by Black Americans, right? So Black Americans, when compared to Asian Americans, to white Americans, to Hispanic Americans, divorce rate in the Black American community is not 50%. They actually have the highest divorce rate. Yes, it is the highest. You guys can go to Black Demographics and check it out. So yeah, this is what happens. Like I said, in China, right? In all of the Chinese cities, the average divorce rate is about 60%. And Black America, right? They also have the highest divorce rate in America. So that's the same thing. And I said my family, right? My family's divorce rate is about 90 to 95%. Yeah, when people are being born, raised in these extremely toxic homes, yeah, the vast majority of them, they will grow up to be all kinds of messed up. And the vast majority of them, even if they are lucky enough to find themselves a girl, they might want to enter a long-term committed relationship. The vast majority of them, they will not want to get married and they will not want to have children. And yeah, it's very obvious if you look at Black America, right? So 75% of Black women in the United States will never get married. 75%. And this is the direct result. Black Americans have the highest divorce rates in America. For my family, it's over 90%. And that is exactly why, if you look at my hometown in Northeast China, if you look at the Heilongjiang province, if you look at the Jilin province, if you look at the Liaoning province, right? The three provinces with the highest divorce rates. These three provinces also have the lowest birth rates overall in China. It's all 100% correlated. The reason why, people back in the day in China, they were breeding like rabbits, like this, from 540 million to 1 billion, right? Well, it's because up until the 1990s, there was no divorce in China. And now divorce rate in China is, in most Chinese cities is 60%. The birth rate is dropping to like this, 0.6 in China's biggest cities. And it's also very, very obvious, right? If you look at the Black America, and their birth rate is also dropping to well below replacement level at 1.7. But look at Nigeria. Why are they having, on average, 5 children per woman? It's because, once again, a lot of people in Nigeria, they're unemployed. They don't have jobs. They have nothing to do. So it's just like what the Chinese used to do in the 50s and the 60s, right? They spend most of the time breeding like rabbits because, there's nothing else to do. A lot of people, they've been asking me, why are you so obsessed with, Black America, with Black culture? Well, because I can personally relate on so many levels, right? I did say my mom, she's about to divorce for the 7th time. My sister, she's coming up to her 4th divorce. So in my family, I've had so many people getting arrested. My mom's youngest brother, he was arrested, went to jail for 8 years. I had a cousin, he was arrested, going to jail for gang-related stabbing. He owns a machete. He's a gangster wannabe. And, I have prostitutes in my family. My stepmom used to work as a prostitute in the Chinese city of Shenzhen. Yeah, one of the skankiest Asian women you will ever meet. Then my grandfather, he's a registered sex offender. Then my dad, he also raped multiple women in my hometown. So that's the situation I'm dealing with. And if you guys think I'm joking or exaggerating, well, that's my reality. That's the family I was born into. It's absolutely nothing I can do. I grew up without a father, and I grew up without a mother. So when people are growing up in these kind of families, and that's what the average Black American's going through, well, obviously they're going to grow up to be all kinds of messed up. And the vast majority of these people, when they grow up, they will not want to get married, and they will not want to have children. And that is how a civilization ends. And if you're someone who's Black, and especially if you're, watching this from America, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Growing up in my family, I've never had a single moment of peace with my dad, with my mom, with my aunts, with my uncles, with my sister. Every single day was like, you dirty ass skank, you stupid bitch, bitch, I will you right up the right? I saw phones getting smashed. I saw chairs being thrown out the window. I saw TVs getting hammered to pieces. I saw people throwing mahjong tiles right at each other. And I told you guys, right, when I was in grade 2, my grandmother, she was nearly choked to death by my grandfather. After she started viciously beating him with chopsticks, oftentimes for no reason, she would take out a pair of chopsticks and start stabbing my grandfather in the head viciously to the point where he's bleeding from multiple points in his head. Every single member of my family is like that. And that is the experience of an average Black American growing up. And you're wondering why there's so many problems with Black culture. You're wondering why there's so many problems in the inner cities. Family is everything. I don't give a shit about, what the previous generation are telling you guys, right? Their life was, 10 times easier. The reason why they can all pump out 5, 6, 7, 8 children is because the vast majority of them, in their younger days, they had nothing to do. 300 million Chinese peasants, they received their own piece of land in the 1950s for the very first time, right? They work on the field for a few hours a day, and that was it. And the marriages were arranged. They didn't have to worry about, being an incel or trying to pick up women or trying to work on their wrists, right? The vast majority of these Chinese men, after they turned 20, they were given a 18-year-old Chinese virgin, and they stay married for life. And so they spend half of their time working in the field and the other half of the time having sex all day. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rounds every single day, sometimes 30 days straight without taking a single break. Thank you guys so much for clicking on this video and watching it all the way until the end. If you guys have enjoyed the contents of this video, please consider subscribing to this channel. Like the video, leave a comment, turn on the notification button, and we'll see you guys back on this channel for Friday. Thank you, guys.